Picture this. You're standing in the middle of nowhere. The kind of nowhere where the wind cuts like a knife and the darkness feels alive, pressing in on you with every ragged breath. Your stomach's empty, your hands are numb, and the cold is sinking into your bones like it's got a personal grudge. There's no phone to call for help, no GPS to point you home, no cozy cabin waiting with a warm bed. Just you, the wild, and whatever you can pull from the dirt and trees around you. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But here's the thing. This wasn't a nightmare for medieval people. This was their everyday. Long before we had high-tech gear or even basic conveniences, folks in the Middle Ages faced this raw, brutal world head-on. They didn't just survive. They built lives out of nothing but sticks, stones, and sheer grit. And the tools they crafted? They're not just history lessons. They're lifelines that still work today. Welcome to Boring History, where we're diving into 7 survival tools medieval people built, tools that could still save your skin in the wild. Let's step into their world, walk their paths, and see what we can learn from the people who stared down nature and won. Let's start with the one thing that separates life from death out there. Fire. Imagine you're a shepherd in 12th century England, trudging through a sodden forest as dusk falls. The rain's been relentless, your wool cloak is heavy with water, and the temperature's dropping fast. If you don't get a fire going soon, you're not just cold, you're in trouble. Wolves are prowling, hunger's clawing at you, and the damp is turning your fingers clumsy. You don't have a lighter or matches, but you've got something better, something every traveler carried like a talisman. A tinderbox. This wasn't some shiny gadget. It was a small, rough container, maybe wood, maybe metal, sometimes wrapped in scraps of leather to keep the damp out. Inside, you'd find a chunk of flint, a carbon steel striker, and a blackened piece of char cloth. Usually linen or cotton scorched just enough to catch a spark like a whispered promise. Here's how it went down. You huddle under a dripping pine, your breath fogging in the chill. You take the flint in one hand, the striker in the other, and you strike hard, sharp, like you mean it. Sparks fly, tiny flecks of heat that look like stars against the gloom. One lands on the char cloth, and it doesn't flame up. It smolders, a glowing coal fighting to exist. You cradle that coal like it's your only hope, tucking it into a nest of dry grass or bark shavings you've scraped from the driest spot you could find. You blow gently, coaxing it, and then there it is, flame. It's not just warmth. It's defiance. That fire means you can boil water, cook a scrawny hare you've snared, dry your boots, and keep the shadows at bay. Without it, you're just another lost soul in the wild. What's incredible is how universal this tool was. It wasn't just for shepherds. Monks trekking between monasteries, soldiers on campaign, villagers tending fields, they all carried a tinderbox. Some kept it in satchels. Others tied it to their belts or sealed it with wax to fight the damp. Why? Because fire wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Purified water sterilized wounds, scared off predators, and turned a freezing night into something you could endure. The tinderbox was a weapon, and the skill to use it was passed down like a secret handshake. You didn't just carry the tool. You carried the ritual, striking flint, catching sparks, breathing life into flame. I've tried this myself, out in the woods with just a flint and steel, and let me tell you, when that first flame catches, it's like you're standing shoulder to shoulder with every medieval wanderer who ever faced a storm. It's not just heat. It's independence, proof you don't need a gadget to beat the wild. And that's what the medieval world teaches us. Survival isn't about what you own. It's about what you know. Today, we've got ferro rods and magnesium blocks, but the principle's the same. Spark, tinder, patience. So, next time you're camping, skip the lighter for a day. Grab a flint, a striker, some char cloth, and light a fire the old way. Feel the weight of centuries in your hands, and you'll see why this tool was the spark that kept humanity alive. But fire's only the start. Once you've got it, you need to do something with it, and that's where things get practical. Imagine you're that same shepherd, now with a small fire crackling under a tree. You've got a rabbit you've trapped and some wild herbs you've foraged, but how do you cook them? You can't hold the meat over the flames. Your hands would burn, and you'd ruin the meal. And you're not about to eat it raw and risk getting sick. This is where medieval ingenuity shines, with a tool so simple it feels like it shouldn't work. The folding wooden tripod. Picture this. You find 3 sturdy branches, each about as tall as your shoulder. You notch one end of each, lash them together at the top with whatever you've got. Plant fiber, rawhide, or even braided bark, and spread the legs apart. Just like that, you've got a stable frame over your fire, ready to hold a pot, a kettle, or strips of meat for smoking. This wasn't just a cooking hack. It was a game changer. You could hang a pot to boil water or stew your game. String some crossbars across the tripod's shoulders, and you've got a rack to smoke meat, preserving it for the long winter ahead. Add slats between the legs, and it's a drying shelf for mushrooms, roots, or your drenched cloak. The best part? It was mobile. When you were done, you'd fold it up, sling it over your shoulder, and set it up again at the next camp in minutes. If a branch broke, you'd cut another. No screws, no nails, no forge, just the forest and your own resourcefulness. This was the medieval camp kitchen, and it didn't need electricity or propane. All it needed was 3 sticks, a fire, and someone smart enough to put them together. I love this tool because it's a reminder of how little we actually need to get by. And we were struggling to balance a pot on some wobbly rocks over a fire. Then I remembered this trick. We cut 3 branches, lashed them together, and suddenly we were eating like royalty, with a pot of stew simmering over the flames. Felt like we'd cracked some ancient code, and in a way we had. The tripod wasn't just a tool, it was a philosophy. It said, "The land has everything you need, if you know how to ask." And that's a lesson we could all use today, when we're so used to buying solutions instead of building them. But here's the catch. Fire and food are useless if you don't have clean water. In the medieval world, water was a roll of the dice. A sparkling stream might look safe, but one sip could leave you feverish, vomiting, or worse. People back then didn't have Brita filters or chemical tablets. But they weren't naive. They figured out how to clean their water with nothing but charcoal, sand, and a bit of patience. Imagine you're in a small village in the hills of medieval Scotland. A storm's churned up the local stream, and the kids are starting to get sick from drinking the muddy water. What do? You grab a clay pot, a wooden barrel, or even a woven basket lined with cloth, and you build a filter like a survival sandwich. At the bottom, you pack gravel to catch the big stuff, twigs, leaves, debris. Then a thick layer of sand to trap the fine particles clouding the water. And on top, the real magic. Crushed charcoal, burnt wood ground into a coarse black powder. You pour the dirty water in and wait. It drips through, slow and steady, each layer stripping away a bit more of the filth. The charcoal doesn't just filter. It absorbs odors, toxins, even some microbes, turning stagnant, foul-tasting water into something you can stomach. It's not sterile, but it's a fighting chance. Villagers kept these filters by their hearths or in their gardens. Monasteries got creative, carving stone troughs or lining trenches with gravel and ash to purify rainwater or snowmelt. But the idea was the same, simple, effective, and built from the earth. I've built one of these in my backyard, just to test it. I poured in some murky pond water, and what came out was clearer, cooler, and didn't make me gag. It's not high-tech, but when you're miles from a tap, it's a miracle. What blows my mind is how this knowledge hasn't faded. Modern survivalists still use charcoal and sand filters when the power's out or the stores are empty. It's a reminder that survival isn't about chasing perfection. It's about doing what you can with what's around you. In the medieval world, that meant using the land, your hands, and a refusal to give up. And that refusal didn't stop at water. It extended to keeping warm, because out in the wild, cold isn't just a nuisance. It's a predator. Let's talk about staying warm, because in the medieval wild, cold could kill you faster than hunger or wolves. There were no sleeping bags, no electric heaters, just you and a night that felt like it wanted you dead. But medieval people had a trick up their sleeve, one so clever it feels like they were cheating nature. The hot stone bed. Here's how it worked. You'd gather dense, dry stones, fist-sized or bigger, but never river rocks, because those can explode when heated. You'd build a strong fire, place the stones in the flames, and let them soak up the heat for an hour or more. When they're glowing hot, you pull them out with sticks or a cloth, bury them shallow in the ground where you plan to sleep, and cover them with a layer of dirt or moss to insulate. Then you lay your bedding on top, if you had any, and you rest. The heat rises slowly, warming your body through the night, keeping hypothermia at bay. This wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. Shepherds used it in the mountains, hunters in deep forests, even monks crossing the Alps. I tried it once on a chilly night in the woods, and it was like sleeping on a radiator. The warmth doesn't flicker like a fire, doesn't blow out in the wind, and doesn't give away your position to anything lurking in the dark. It's just you, the earth, and a heat that feels ancient, like it's coming from the heart of the world. What I love about this is how it shows medieval people didn't fight nature, they worked with it. Those stones, that fire, that dirt. They're a conversation with the land, one that says, I'm staying alive, no matter what. But even with a fire and a warm bed, there's one thing that's always fragile. The flame itself. A gust of wind, a sudden rain, and your fire's gone, taking your warmth and your hope with it. That's where the grease-soaked fire rope comes in. A tool so simple it's almost humbling, but so brilliant it's hard to believe it's not standard issue today. Picture yourself as a medieval traveler, moving through a storm, your fire barely clinging to life. You need something to keep that flame alive, something you can carry with you. So you take a piece of rope, maybe plant fiber, horsehair, or twisted bark, and soak it in animal grease, tallow, or wax. You let it dry just enough to be sticky, not dripping, then coil it into a tight spiral and light one end. You place it in a clay bowl, a hollowed-out horn, or even on a flat stone, and it burns slow, steady, reliable. For 1 to 3 hours, that little rope keeps your coals hot, warms a shelter, or gives you a spark to start a new fire without digging out the flint. This was the medieval pilot light, a lifeline for shepherds, hunters, and wanderers. You could carry it with you, smoldering in a cloth, like a piece of fire in your pocket. I made one of these with twine and bacon grease, and watching it burn is mesmerizing. It doesn't flare up. It just glows, stubborn and unyielding, like the people who invented it. Today, we've got fatwood or paraffin wicks, but the idea's the same. Keep the flame alive no matter what. And that's what survival is, a spark that refuses to quit, a thread of light in the dark. That thread of light wasn't just about warmth or cooking, though. Sometimes survival meant protecting what little you had, and that's where things get a bit more intense. In the medieval world, food was scarce and predators, animal or human, were always a threat. A fox could steal your chickens, a boar could raid your camp, and not every peasant could afford iron traps or weapons. So they got clever. They made a trap that was part sling, part snare, and all ingenuity. The clay ball sling trap. You take a ball of clay, about the size of an egg, maybe embed a few stones for weight, and bake it until it was hard as bone. Tie it to a cord or a bent sapling under tension. Anchor it with a simple trigger, a stick, a bait hook, anything that would snap when disturbed. Set it on a trail or near your food stores, and when something triggered it, the sapling would whip up, flinging the clay ball with enough force to bruise a flank or crack a skull. This wasn't about killing, it was about sending a warning. A fox would limp away, a thief would think twice, and you'd have a system that didn't need steel or batteries. I love this because it's so practical, so repeatable. If the ball broke, you made another. If the cord snapped, you tied a new one. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about outsmarting the things that want what's yours. And in a world where every meal was a victory, that was everything. But survival wasn't just about food, warmth, or protection. It was about staying alive long enough to enjoy them, and that meant keeping clean. In the medieval world, infection was a death sentence. A bad tooth, a dirty wound, and you were done. But people didn't just give in, they fought back with what they had. They'd take a stick from a willow or birch tree, chew one end until it frayed like a brush, and use it to clean their teeth. Then they'd mix fine ash from the fire with water or fat to make a gritty paste. It wasn't minty, but it was alkaline, scrubbing away residue and killing bacteria. They'd rinse with salt water, rub ash on their gums, even use twigs like floss. For wounds, they boiled nettle leaves, used moss as bandages, or, yes, it's grim, applied fermented urine as an antiseptic. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. This is the history I live for, the kind that's not in grand chronicles but in the dirt under your nails. These people weren't smarter than us, they didn't have more than us, they just had no choice. They faced hunger, cold, and infection with nothing but sticks, stones, and stubbornness. And here's the kicker. Every one of these tools still works. The tinderbox, the tripod, the filter, the hot stone bed, the fire rope, the clay ball trap, the ash toothbrush, they're not museum pieces. They're proof that survival is about knowledge, not gear. So next time you're out in the wild, or even just messing around in your backyard, try one of these. Strike a spark, lash a tripod, filter some water, feel the weight of 1,000 years in your hands, and remember, you're not just surviving. You're carrying a flame that's been burning since the days when survival was all there was. Thanks for joining me on this journey through boring history. If you loved this dive into medieval survival, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Drop a comment below. Have you ever tried any of these tools? Got a survival trick of your own? Let's keep the conversation going, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll uncover more of the past's hidden gems, one spark at a time.